On Thursday, June 2nd, Amtrak Joe Biden offered a speech at the tax-funded White House and parroted what his tax-funded speechwriters prepared for him to say about reducing gun violence. Said the big guy, quote,
"The Second Amendment, like all other rights, is not absolute." It was Justice Scalia who wrote, and I quote, "Like most rights, the Second Amendment, the rights granted by the Second Amendment are not unlimited."
Which indicates that Biden not only has no grasp of or respect for the philosophical and etymological origin of the word right, he doesn't care for logical consistency. And as I and others predicted years ago, he's using Scalia's error in a 2008 Supreme Court decision to back him up. Hi everyone, I'm Gardner Goldsmith for MRC-TV, and here's the classroom message to Amtrak Joe and his fans when it comes to the word rights. Rights are supposed to be unassailable by the state. The term rights stands for hands off and is universal for all people, meaning that each of us has an equal right to be left alone. Rights are negative in nature, not positive. The idea of a positive right to something provided by another person is not a right. It's an immoral claim, posited by agents of the state. In other words, it's an attempt to enslave. The term right has its origins in Old English, Saxon, Middle Dutch, and Medieval German. It pertains to proper, which, sorry lefties, in those days was associated with right-handedness and stemmed from both the belief at the time that people who were left-handed were not functioning properly and from the biblical observation of the Messiah being the right hand of God. So, Joe, it is not up to you to define rights. They pre-exist you, buddy Joe. And so does the inherent God-given liberty of each man pre-exist the state. Likewise, rights aren't granted by the Second Amendment. They pre-exist it. The amendment is supposed to protect us from people like you, Joe. But one of the things that Biden mentioned, that being the comment about Scalia, well, that is not incorrect in the mention, even as it buys into the error Scalia made. Or should I say, the sellout of rights in which Scalia appears to have engaged. It's from his majority decision for the 2007-2008 D.C. v. Heller Supreme Court case. The case dealt with Washington, D.C. resident Richard Heller, who worked in the policing field and wanted to keep a firearm in his D.C. home. But that peaceful act was prohibited by federal statute applied to D.C. Feds took the tack that the right to keep and bear arms, supposedly protected by the Second Amendment, is a group right, which, of course, is fantasy, because the word group is a term to describe more than two individuals. And as I previously have noted at MRC-TV, individuals never lose their inherent individuality, regardless of how the government wants to label or group them. Additionally, the Second Amendment is emphatic. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, in his majority decision, Scalia agreed about the right to keep and bear arms being an individual right, devoting over 60 pages in his decision to contemporaneous citations from the founding era, definitively showing that the founders believed it was an individual right. But he didn't need to spend that much time and space on it because Scalia could have used the logic I mentioned earlier, and he could have finished his opinion in about a page. And, unfortunately, he committed a larger offense. Because at the end of his decision, Scalia wrote what Biden claims. Scalia said that rights are not unlimited. In other words, Scalia undercut the very definition of rights. And Biden's further attack?
We need to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. And if we can't ban assault weapons, then we should raise the age to purchase them from 18 to 21.
What does Biden mean by assault weapons? Does he mean the kinds of weapons the Obama administration sent to Mexico in Fast and Furious? Or the kinds of weapons they allegedly gave to radical rebels in Syria? Or perhaps the kinds of weapons the U.S. sells to governments like Israel and Egypt? Or does he mean the kinds of weapons his own administration is handing to Ukraine? As Chris Freund writes for the Daily Times, quote, "The clarion call is to ban assault weapons. Pay no attention to the fact that that is literally a made-up term, with some polls seeking to ban guns based on how they look," end quote. And do Biden and his ilk really believe that banning so-called high-capacity magazines will stop people with criminal intent from acquiring them? He might want to ask someone from Chicago about bans, as they're called. That's where, supposedly, it's very difficult to buy a gun without being 21 and highly vetted by the government. Homicides and violent crime there are actually rampant. Some of the highest in the Western world, in fact. And as CBS recently noted, Chicago has the highest number of mass shootings in the U.S. That sure is odd, isn't it? Because everyone knows that people with criminal intent make sure they abide by the statutes forbidding them from engaging in crimes. And then there's that age of 21 thing. The right to self-defense does not have an upper or lower age limit, Joe. And by the way, killers aged 18 and younger break statutes against killing. So breaking statutes against lesser offenses like owning guns likely isn't a big worry on their murderous hit list. Adds Freund, quote, "Forgotten in the conversation is that the Sandy Hook killer didn't even own an AR-15, but murdered his mother and stole her gun to commit his massacre. On top of that, there are nearly 500 million firearms in America, almost all of which are used legally. Do we ban them too? So that only the criminals have guns?" Indeed, as I noted last week for MRC-TV, gun bans in Australia and the UK did not, as their advocates claim, reduce violent crime. In Australia, so many of the people who relinquished their guns in a mandatory buyback 2 decades ago saw the violent crime rate, including gun-related crime rate, by the way, subsequently increase. So many of them recognized the problem, they eventually entered the black market to buy new guns. And so, the Aussie government recently has tried another gun buyback, because of course, the first was so successful and got rid of all the guns. And then there's Biden's brilliant
Repeal the immunity that protects gun manufacturers from liability.
This completely undermines due process, switching liability from the nutter who kills to the maker of the object the nutter used to kill. It opens the liability to people who have committed no wrong, and logically can be applied to any physical object that a whack job could use to kill. And the fact is, people use firearms far more often to prevent crimes than criminally minded people use them to commit crimes, and more often than police can prevent crimes. As the saying goes, when seconds count, police are just minutes away. And sometimes they stand outside the gun-free school zone while a gun-wielding killer kills more unarmed people.
We should also have national red flag laws so that a parent, a teacher, a counselor can flag for a court that a child, a student, a patient is exhibiting violent tendencies, threatening classmates, or experiencing suicidal thoughts.
Secret complaints filed with a judge? Secret warrants? No due process? Breaching the 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 14th Amendments? And national? Since when was the worry that a child, a student, a patient might be exhibiting violent tendencies or threatening classmates or experiencing suicidal thoughts, and how does one define that? Since when were any of those supposed to be federal matters, according to their U.S. Constitution? None of this is Joe Biden's place, and it's not the place of any politician to prohibit the possession of an inanimate object. The possession of an object is not an aggressive act. The reason for possessing it is subjective. And even if one were to assume why someone owned a firearm, it's more likely that the firearm will be used to stop violent crime than to engage in it. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Please spread the word about these videos. We'll see you on YouTube. We'll see you on Rumble. We'll see you in Facebook. We'll see you on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. And of course, if you want to find me on Twitter, I am @GuardGoldsmith on Twitter. Please visit MRCTV.org. That's MRCTV.org to find out what the core group is doing there. So much great work. And the MRC Store is always open, so you can support the Media Research Center. Oh, and I'm also on Gab @GardnerGoldsmith. For MRC TV, thanks for watching.